संस्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। पवित्रं चरितं यस्याः पवित्रं जीवनं तथा पवित्रतास्वरूपिण्यै तस्यै कुर्मो नमो नमः। नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। ॐ सर्वमङ्गलमाङ्गल्ये शिवे सर्वार्थसाधिके शरण्ये त्र्यम्बके गौरी नारायणि नमोऽस्तुते। Every first 2 Sundays of every month, we are at present discussing the Karma Yoga of Swami Vivekananda. Today I will be going directly to the chapter. In the last class, I had given an introduction. We started with the last chapter where the ideal of Karma Yoga. Swamiji says the grandest idea in the religion of Vedanta is that we may reach the same goal by different paths. And these Swamiji says, I have generalized into 4. So, Karma, Bhakti, Gnana, Yoga. For that, we had discussed, the mind has, according to Western psychology, they say their functions or faculties are 3. But I have added 1 for our understanding. Thinking, feeling and willing, Alochana Shakti, Bhavana Shakti, Icha Shakti, and 1 more, Atma Sanyama, that self-control. So, to purify the thinking, we have Gnana Yoga. To purify the emotions, we have Bhakti Yoga. To increase the willpower, or to purify the willpower, we have the Karma Yoga. And to purify the self-control, we have the Raja Yoga. That's the explanation. I have already explained all those things. Just to remind you of what we discussed, I just gave a introduction. Now coming to the first chapter, chapter 1, Karma in its effect on character. Here, as I generally say, generally, rarely common people, have the opportunity to study the Shastras. Though we have Bhagavad Gita, forget the Upanishads, at least Bhagavad Gita. We generally take the general meaning, the word meaning, but how to study it as a Shastra? Suppose let us say you study Shankara Bhagavad Pada's Bhashya. Even to enter into understanding the Bhashya, first and the foremost is the basic understanding of the grammar of Sanskrit. Of course, I am telling you in the perspective of studying it intellectually. Suppose if you realize God, all these things will simply vanish, nothing to worry. Of course, it does not happen so easily. Yesterday evening, I had been to Kolar. So, there was a program in the evening in a temple. On the way, I thought of visiting the Gathalli. Of course, I had visited in maybe 93 or 94 when Swami Purushottamji took all of us. We were the volunteers. So, generally, whenever on Sundays, weekdays we had schools and colleges. On Sundays, if we had time, Maharaj Purushottamji used to take us. And he had taken me to Gathalli first time, maybe 93, 94 or still earlier. So, I remembered Gathalli. So, on the way to Kolar, still we had 1 hour time. I requested our volunteers to take me, and of course, they were one student of Vidyarthi Mandiram, staying very close by. And he took to that place where that Anjanappa Swami used to reside there. He stayed for 113 years, 113. Actually, he was an ardent devotee of Lord Hanuman. He had realized in his life story, he says, he had realized Lord Hanuman. The fact that I am going to tell you is, you see, he was a bonded laborer, Jitadalu. But how come he could realize Hanuman? Actually, in his life story, they have written, when whole day he used to work, he was working in a particular family, looking after the goat, sheep, looking after the cows, and doing all works, a coolie. But night, he used to go to nearby places under a tree and on the top of a hill and meditate. Who gave the knowledge that God realization is the goal of life? Did Sri Ramakrishna announced in Gospel? Did he read it? He, Anjanappa, you sing that, Nee nallige hoga bedaiya, O Anjaneya. That song we sing here in the prayer hall, that he has composed. So, he used to meditate during nights. On one particular day, in the night, a great Swami, he thought he was a sannyasi. He didn't know who he was. While he was meditating, he called him, "You please follow me." And he thought he is maybe some guru or something, and he followed him. And they climbed a small hillock and again descended. And then he entered a place where he saw some saintly people, rishis sitting all around. And then he questioned who they are. Then the Swami who took him told they are all the Saptarshis. In the midst of the Saptarshi was sitting Lord Shiva himself. And he called this Anjanappa and asked to stick out his tongue. The moment he opened his mouth, this Lord Shiva wrote the Bijakshara. Actually, he has written what Bijakshara that he has received from Lord Shiva in the temple of Hanuman. Over the above on the stone, he has written it. So, then it comes in his life. Lord Shiva instructs him that in course of life, you chant this Bijakshara. In course of time, you will realize God. So, if he had that passion inside, he knew that to realize God is the goal of life. What was his condition? He was a bonded laborer. We have so much facilities. Talking from my personal perspective, don't misunderstand me. I am not speaking about you. We have a mutt, we have a guru, we have a diksha, we have sannyasa. Still we have not realized God. But he was a bonded laborer, and he himself, after a vision of Lord Hanuman, and Hanuman instructed him, it comes all is in his life, to build a temple. So he himself took 2 years. Daytime he used to work in that house. He needed little money. And during night, he used to break rocks and he used to finish it in a particular rectangular shape to give it a size. And then he himself, without anybody's support, has built that small temple of Hanuman, which still exists now. He started in 1947. It ended in 1949. He took 2 years to build that temple. Still it's existing. The same Murti of Lord Hanuman is still there, which he established. He passed away in 1971. So every year on Buddha Purnima, they celebrate annual celebrations, what we call. And generally we volunteer, Purushottamji was called there to do bhajans, and we volunteers accompanied him to do all the work and help him in other book sales, etc. So I remembered yesterday. So I went there. That day I was a mere boy, didn't know anything. Now I have a particular goal in life. So just out of curiosity, I went there. And still that same place, same space is existing there, Gattalli. So when I started reading, I remembered Anjanappa Swami. Because Swami explains here, the way he explains now, connection. So, to understand our life, I will come to it when I start. I will first begin. Let us begin. The word karma, I will connect with Anjanappa Swami also. When we talk, Swami says it's karma in its effect on character. Karma may have many effects, but Swami is concerned with only effect on character. Why do we need a character? So to know the character, understanding the karma in its effect on character is the purpose of this chapter. Why do we need a character? Swami makes it clear. First he starts with the root word kr. Karma means it starts with root. Dhatu is kr. means all to do, karanam, karane. Karane in Sanskrit is called karane, to do. So, all Swamiji gives three meaning. All actions is karma, and effects of actions is called karma, and in a metaphysics sense it is called prarabdha karma. These three I have explained in my last class. Now, here in Karma Yoga, what should we understand by the word karma? Swamiji says, simply karma as meaning work. Work. Here, Karma Yoga, you have to understand by the word karma as work. Now, where is next wonderful statement Swamiji makes? The goal of mankind, which I have discussed, given an introduction to this sentence, but now the discussion begins now. The goal of mankind is knowledge. All these things we should always remember. I don't say that we should remember occasionally, off and on, like Ekadashi. No. Always we should remember this. We should make the mind to remember always. The goal of mankind is knowledge. Swamiji is speaking about Karma Yoga, karma in its effect on character. Before beginning the discussion, he is making one statement. The goal of mankind is knowledge. He says, that is the one ideal placed before us by Eastern philosophy. Not the Western philosophy, by Eastern philosophy. What the goal of mankind is knowledge. Now you have to link many things here. When Swamiji says, the goal of mankind is knowledge, by work we mean actions. Or by meaning karma, we mean work. Now before understanding its effect, when I told effect, there are two things. One is external phala. Suppose I write an examination and I will get in a particular position. That is the karma phala, one side. Second karma phala is the samskara that gives by doing that particular action. These two are the phala. So now, when Swamiji says the goal of mankind is knowledge, why he is intending the goal? First analyze the goal, then come to the goal of knowledge. Until unless you have a particular goal, you don't have a direction for your karma, which leads to a particular character, which leads to knowledge. I think I am clear. You should not be confused. The goal of mankind is knowledge. So, goal is knowledge. You need a character which leads to knowledge. You have to perform such karma which leads to particular character, which leads to knowledge. So, before entering it is, I feel sometimes it is so clear, but still so many people say, complete verse what they Swamiji, artha nagle. What you did not understand? Understand it properly. Read it properly. The goal of mankind is knowledge. Now, we want such an effect of character, such an effect of karma which leads to a character which leads to knowledge. So that's why we are dealing with karma in its effect on character. Not me, Swamiji's lecture. So, now I will give one example in Sri Ramakrishna's life. When Sri Ramakrishna, you analyze the life of Sri Ramakrishna, you see, from his childhood days, Sri Ramakrishna is Gadai. From his childhood days, none of his actions were so which did not lead it to God realization. Every action Gadai will decide whether it leads to God. That's why when Ram Kumar, his eldest brother, asked him to learn, go to school and learn ritualistic approach and little bit of education, so-called modern education, in the terms of earning money, he told, I am not interested in education which gives a few plantains and rice. Akki paadenu vidya nanage beda. He understood the end point of this particular action. Every action Gadai will analyze, whether this leads, Dhani Kamarini. When the day was fixed for his, in a modern term, third ceremony, Upanayanam, he gave the word to Dhani that, Mother, I will take. She also requested that the first bhiksha will be from my side. You have to accept it. It was the whole Thakur's life, Gadai's life happened in 1940s, not 2022. It is 1840s. So during those times, in no way the people of other caste were allowed into Brahminical family. No way you were allowed. And still, can you imagine to take a first bhiksha from her, Dhani? Please sit down, please sit down. Don't move all, disturb the other audience. You have no right. This action is not correct, which does not lead to character. Either sit at the last, don't come in between and disturb the speeches. All others will be seeing at you. You should not misunderstand. Understand everything in the right perspective. Because we are on YouTube, I cannot instruct many things, a lot of limitations. So, when Dhani was requested Gadhai to allow him to give first the bhiksha, what Gadhai replied to his elder brother Ramkumar, eldest brother Ramkumar completely denied it. It's impossible. He said impossible. Then Gadhai says, I am not eligible to take the mantra Gayatri by being untruthful. I should be truthful because I want to attain truth, which is absolute truth. Absolute truth is nothing but God. The way to attain truth is by truthfulness. If I tell a lie, how can I attain truthfulness? Through Gayatri, it's impossible. Every action you will analyze. It's a small action, taking a bhiksha from Dhani. But he did not accept it, his elder brother, but he denied it. Who? His Ramkumar. And Gadai completely says, I am in no way ready to take Upanayanam. If the action does not lead to the particular goal, even the sun may fall on earth, Gadai will not do it. If the action leads to the goal, even the sun may fall on the earth, he will do it. That's why first Swamiji says, by word karma, we mean by work. Now you understand the goal, which is knowledge. The goal of mankind is knowledge. Now analyze the work and the end, whether it leads the way, to extent we compromise, to the extent we are away from the goal. To the extent we are nearer to the knowledge, to the extent the means is leading to the goal. That's why Swamiji very clear. The goal of mankind, not just you and me, whole mankind. You may agree or disagree. The whole mankind has to take, the goal is knowledge. And by meaning knowledge, how to understand this knowledge? Of course, Swamiji has explained so many places. By meaning knowledge, what you? The knowledge of our real or the true nature. True nature. What do you mean by knowledge? The meaning or the experience or the understanding of the true nature of man. Every individual. Man means you may understand woman. No. Of an individual. Of the existence itself. That is knowledge. Now, of course, in a very way, Swamiji, pleasure is not the goal of man, but knowledge. Yes. Then immediately he uses two words here. Pleasure and happiness come to an end. He could have simply told pleasure. First he took the word pleasure. It's not the goal of man, but knowledge. Okay, accepted. And pleasure and happiness come to an end. Please be seated at there itself. Sit down there. Amma. ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಇದ್ದರೆ ಹಿಂದೆ ಕೂತ್ಕೊಂಬಿಡಿ, ಮುಂದೆ ಬರಬೇಡಿ. This is not a general talk to hear. It's a very serious talk. Next time I have to ask our volunteers to sit near the doors. Or some of you only have to volunteer and sit at the door and not allow people to enter once the lecture starts. You have to make a volunteership. Of course, I may not stay after 2 months. Make it a point to, once the lecture starts, nobody should enter the hall. Let them sit outside the hall. When Swamiji first begins, pleasure is not the goal of life. Okay? In the second sentence he says, pleasure and happiness cannot be the goal of mankind. Why he has used the word pleasure and happiness. He could have simply meant pleasure. And in the meantime, before the last sentence, the goal of mankind is knowledge. You now remember Anjanappa Swami. The goal of mankind is knowledge. His every action, though in a materialistic world, in a materialistic viewpoint, his actions was a very menial type, very ordinary. But he realized God, which many saints may not have. If you study his whole life of 113 years, once he was beaten by a landlord, he simply accepted his beating, that person. So, here, and in the meantime, I started with reading Bhagavad Gita. Why I quoted Shankara? Because to understand the particular meaning of that particular word and sentence, you should have the knowledge of so many other informations connected with that language. First is the Sanskrit. Second comes a little bit of philosophy, Shaddarshana. If you want to study Shankara, you should have the knowledge of Shaddarshana, at least in Nyaya, Mimamsa in particular, because he also denies Mimamsa. Whenever he says karma, 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 it's all Mimamsa karma. I will come to it later on. So you should have a knowledge of Mimamsa. Then you come to understanding of what he says by Vedanta Upanishads. Now on that he has to give in that Bhashya. With these basic elements, you can understand the Bhashya. In the same way, when you read the complete of Swami Vivekananda, you should give utmost attention to the every word that Swamiji is going to use it here. He started with pleasure. Now he is coming to pleasure and happiness. Do you find any difference between pleasure and happiness? When Swamiji says pleasure, we have to understand the experience that the sense organs gets when it comes in contact with the objects of the senses. It is called the pleasure. Of course, you may get pain, but that which is soothing and pleasing, we call the pleasure. Contact of the sense organs with the sensory objects, with respective senses, respective objects. It is called the pleasure, which is, Swamiji says, cannot be the goal of life. It comes to an end. Once the object is removed, the experience also is removed. Only the memory stays on. Why he uses the word happiness? He could have simply meant pleasure. No, because happiness is a state of mind which does not depend on the external circumstances. A richest man may be unhappy, most unhappy man in the world. A poor man may be the happiest man. The circumstances does not dictate the happiness of the person. It's a state of mind which is also depends, the state varies, the mind state varies. Hence, happiness or the happiness of the mind cannot be constant. Both pleasure and happiness cannot be the goal of life. Esto many people come to ashram. Why? Swamiji Supa Shanti Sigati. No, that is not the goal of Ramakrishna mission. Atmano mokshartam jagadhitaya cha. That is always the goal. You have to understand. You may come to mutt or places like this seeking happiness, but understand happiness and pleasure cannot be the goal of life. Goal of mankind is knowledge. That's why reading and understanding has a particular methodology. I am giving one methodology. This is not a standard methodology. Now, of course, this is one of the standard of methodology. Now, Swamiji continues. After a time, man finds it is not happiness but knowledge. After a time, how do you understand after a time? When man evolves due to experience in the world. Now, he continues, pleasure and pain are great teachers. Of course, continuing, he says, pleasure and pain are great teachers, and that he learns as much from evil as from good. Okay? As pleasure and pain pass before, I am very interested in particular one word here. That's why I am reading it. As pleasure and pain pass before his soul, They have upon it different pictures. How do you understand this word soul? As pleasure and pain pass before his soul. How to understand this word? It is small s, not capital S. Whenever we use the word soul with a capital S, it is Atman. When you use the small word S for the soul, it means I consciousness. That's why, as pleasure and pain pass before this man in particular, they have upon it different pictures, and the result of these combined impressions is what is called man's character. The inclination, the total inclination of that particular person, the pravritti. Where does your pravritti lies? That is your character. You may come to Ramakrishna Math. You may go work in a particular company. You have a particular profession to do. With all that, you have a particular pravritti, the inclination. That is what is meant by character. How does it come? With the experience of pleasure and pain and misery in the world, you get this particular character. Now, Swamiji says, misery and happiness are equal factors in the formation of that character. Okay? In some instances, misery is a greater teacher than happiness. In some instances, of course, I can say in many instances. Just little correction from my side. In some instances, misery is a greater teacher than happiness. Now, saying this, Swamiji says, misery is a greater teacher than happiness. Okay? You want to quote from whom? From our common life perspective? No. Swamiji says, in studying the great characters the world has produced, I dare say, in the vast majority of cases, it will be found that it was misery that has taught more than happiness. From which perspective? From the perspective of great characters the world has produced. Here, when you say Sri Ramachandra, Maryada Purushottama Shodasha Guna Sampannaha Sri Ramachandra Maryada Purushottamaha Saha Ramachandraha. When you say, why you say Ramachandra Maryada Purushottama Shodasha Guna Sampanna? Was he adored because he was the king of Bharatavarsha? No. He was adored because he accepted misery from our perception. He accepted misery for 14 long years, though being a king of a great country. We won't adore Ramachandra because he was the king and the eldest brother of Rama, Bharata, Shatrughna, Lakshmana, Bharata. No. Putra of Dasharatha? No. Putra of Kausalya? No. We adore him, Sri Ramachandra, because he underwent misery for 14 long years being a king, though he did not give word to mother Kaikeyi. No. It was his father's mistake. No, in not one sense not mistake. Very long back he gave some boon to his youngest wife, and she took advantage of that and sent the eldest son to the forest. And Sri Ramachandra, great in the vast majority of the cases, we found that it was misery that taught more than happiness. And Sita, though in the beginning she was not asked to come along with Rama, it was decided Rama and Lakshmana will go to the forest. And even he gave instructions how to live in a palace when his own husband is not there for 14 long years. Even Sri Ramachandra instructs there to Sita, you see, never praise me, not in front of Bharata, not even in front of the servants of Bharata. Because these servants will add something, masala, vaggarne, and they will just transfer that information to Bharata, and he may take some steps against your wishes. So it's better not to praise me even in front of the servants of Bharata. That was the instruction which Ramachandra gave before leaving. Afterwards, of course, she is well. So it is true in majority of the cases, even in wonderful characters like Sri Ramachandra, it is misery which has taught greatest lessons than happiness in the world. Even if you take the life of Swamiji itself, Narendranath, here when he underwent lot of, you should analyze all these instances. It is very necessary to analyze every incident of great people. It has got its own insight. You should analyze it very particularly, different instances of Narendranath. When Narendra was passing through difficult situations in his life, especially during his youth when his father passed away without any intimation. Of course, nobody will give any intimation, but this was very sudden heart attack, passed away by his father in 2 o'clock. He was in some friend's house and he was called back, and so much debt his father had done. All those things came to picture only when father passed away, and suddenly such a brilliant student, Narendranath, praised by his England professors, even later period, Silent and Dutt, they all praised him so much. But still, this Narendra, with all talents, could not get a job to earn money. The greatest question that he had during those youth was, how come a merciful father means God, Karunamayanada Bhagavanta, how can a merciful God can have so much misery in the world? Nobody could answer this question for Narendra. Then, because he is studying great characters, the word has proved, I dare say, in the vast majority of cases, it would be found that it was misery that taught more than happiness. Narendra had this question. Why, if you say God is so merciful, why people die due to poverty? Why there is so much misery in this world? He had this question. He got an answer. Why? Because misery is the greatest teacher than happiness in this world. I will analyze this situation when Swamiji deals with the knowledge. When Swamiji says knowledge is within, I will analyze this incident there. I have given an introduction here, that's all. Now, a devotee of Swamiji writes, not a devotee in such sense, but a known person by name Mrinalini Bose, writes a letter to Swamiji. She had so many questions regarding the social customs of particularly India, and she also had a question to Swamiji that why there is so much misery in this world. In reply to Mrinalini Bose letter, Swamiji writes in reply one more letter to her, that dated 23/12/1898 to Mrinalini. I think he was in, at that time Swamiji was there in Diogar. From Diogar, Swamiji replies to her letter, Mrinalini Bose letter. I just read only the last, but it is more than 4 pages letter. I just read the last paragraph of the letter. The way, though we know many things, but the way Swamiji deals with the misery of the world, you just see the end point. It begins with misery. But give utmost attention from misery. Finally, where do Swamiji stand at the end in the letter? That is the very important point that we have to understand. Mother, I am quoting from the Swamiji's letter, reading from the Swamiji's letter. Mother, be not be anxious. It is against the big tree that the great wind strikes. Because it's an English lecture, not necessary to explain it. You understand English. It's a default that I have to be. It's not necessary to make it understand you in Kannada. Poking a fire makes it burn better. These are all the explanations Swamiji is trying to give. But you should give attention to the end of this letter. Poking a fire makes it burn better. A snake struck on the head raises its hood. Actually, Swamiji does not continue, he puts a comma and then continues, but this particular sentence has a particular this thing. A snake struck on the head rises its hood. And this is quoted by Sister Nivedita in the Master as I saw him on Swamiji. She has written reminiscences on Swami Vivekananda in Master as I saw him, where it's a 3 sentence. Swamiji says, a snake lifts its hood when struck on head, meaning a cobra, not a rat snake. Cobra, not even rattlesnake, not even vipers. A cobra, when struck on the head, lifts its hood. Lion gives its mightiest roar when struck at the heart. Because these sentences were very inspiring to me when I read it first time. They were some of the very wonderful statements of Swamiji. Lion gives its mightiest roar when struck at the heart. The potentiality of man comes out when struck deep into the heart. Misery is the greatest teacher than happiness. A snake struck on the head rises its hood. Swamiji does not quote another 2 sentences here. And so on. When there comes affliction in the heart, when the storm of sorrow blows all around, and it seems light will be seen no more, when hope and courage are almost gone, it is then, in the midst of this great spiritual tempest, that now, Swamiji gives uses the important word. This I am quoting from volume 4, page 492. Volume 4, page 492. In the midst of this great spiritual tempest, that the light of Brahman within gleams. You see, we are worried about sorrow, but Swamiji wants to make it very clear here is that the light of the Brahman within gleams, accept sorrow and misery. Brought up in the lap of luxury, Swamiji continues in the letter. Brought up in the lap of luxury, lying on a bed of roses and never shedding a tear, who has ever become great? Who has ever unfolded the Brahman within? Why do you fear to weep? Swamiji is asking the question. Why do you fear to weep? Swamiji says, weep. Weep. Weeping. Now, give attention to the last 3 lines. Such a wonderful statement, Swamiji. Actually, Swamiji wrote in Bengali. This is being translated into English. It's originally a Bengali letter. Give attention. Weeping clears the eyes and brings about the intuition. Weeping clears the eyes, brings about intuition. What intuition? By weeping, it clears the eyes and brings about intuition. What intuition? Then the vision of such a statement, you need some time to understand all these things. Then the vision of diversity, man, animal, tree, slowly melting away, makes room for the infinite realization of Brahman everywhere and everything. You say sorrow, misery and weeping. He says, then the vision of diversity, man, animal and tree, slowly melting away, makes room for the infinite realization of Brahman everywhere and in everything. So much we are afraid of the world, so much we are afraid to misery, so much we cry, so much emotions hidden within, which leads to a lot of complications, health complications. Of course, due to prarabdha that is there, but due to so much emotions stuck inside, which does not give a vent, which has no place to give expressions to those all went up feelings, it will always lead to a lot of health complications. Swamiji says, weep. Weeping clears institution and gives to realization of Brahman. Have you ever, anybody heard? Weeping leads to Brahman. There's a method to understand Swamiji. There's a very wonderful method Swamiji uses to make. Though Upanishads are already told that Brahman is the only reality, you have heard, but did you find that you got strength? Why do you get strength by reading Swamiji? He knows how to express that infinite reality through all the actions that we do. Weeping leads to Brahman. Though not directly connected, it's indirectly, not directly proportional in that sense. Because weeping comes under Maya, Brahman is infinite reality. Don't equate in that direct progression. But in a way, Swamiji says, weeping leads to Brahman. This is what I like in Swamiji. Such a wonderful statement. Now, studying further, continuing further. Now, he gave the meaning of work and the pravritti of a particular man, the inclination, he called the character. And the goal of mankind is knowledge. Now he takes up the word knowledge for discussion. Where is knowledge? If somebody asks, where is knowledge? Swamiji says, it is inherent in man. It's a very important thing to remember. Even if you, I'm telling you, even if you forget or if you don't go to any temples, nothing to worry. But if you forget that knowledge is within, everything is lost. Not necessary to go to temple, not necessary to bow down to any Swami, not necessary to read scriptures. I am talking in the sense of highest sense. Nothing to worry. But if you don't understand that knowledge is within, everything is lost. The purpose of going to temple itself is lost. Now this knowledge again, Swamiji has taken the topic of knowledge, is within. Here there is some wonderful discussion. I will just begin with the discussion. I will continue in the next class. We have to understand what do you really mean by knowledge is within. How do you understand that knowledge is within? Swamiji here says, what we say a man knows should in strict psychological language, be what he discovers or unveils. Suppose somebody says, I know. He knows. What it really psychologically means is, he discovers or unveils. He, by taking the cover of his own soul, again he has used one more time, the soul. Taking the cover of his own soul. Here, by soul means you have to understand, antahkarana. That's why meaning of words are very important. By taking the cover of his own soul, which is a mine of infinite knowledge. Now, Swamiji is trying to explain it here. He gives, all knowledge therefore, secular or spiritual, is in the human mind. Please give attention to this sentence. All knowledge therefore, secular or spiritual, is in the human mind. Both secular and spiritual knowledge is in human mind, which is an infinite mine of knowledge. So knowledge is within, both spiritual and secular. And that within, what you call within, is a mine of infinite knowledge. Okay? Further, Swamiji gives an example that I will quote and try to explain. He takes up the example of Newton discovered gravitation. Now he cannot talk about spiritual knowledge within, because we don't know anything about spirituality at present. So Swamiji takes a secular example to make it understandable that knowledge is within. So he has taken the example of Newton discovering the law of gravity. You be attentive to the every word. Law, he did not discover gravitation. He discovered law of gravitation. What is the difference between law of gravitation and gravitation? Law of gravitation is the knowledge. Gravitation is only a force. So, when Swamiji gives the example, he says, Newton saw the apple falling, and then he uses particular word here. He rearranged all the previous links of thought in his mind and discovered a new link among them, which we call the law of gravitation. It was not in the apple, nor in anything in the center of the earth. Where was the knowledge of gravitation? Was it in the apple? Is it in the earth? The law of gravitation is within. The falling of apple was a suggestion. The external world is simply the suggestion, the occasion which sets you to study your own mind. So, you have to analyze it. I say, for example, let us give a very common example. I see a mic in front of me. When Swamiji says this word, external word, is simply the suggestion, the occasion, which sets you to study your own mind. Okay? This, I am seeing the two things here. One is the mic, and the immediate thing that I see is the table. So, this is a table and this is the mic. This is only a suggestion which gives rise as a suggestion in the mind for the knowledge of the mic, the knowledge of the table. What is the difference between a table and the knowledge of a table? Suppose you destroy this table, with the knowledge of the table within, I can produce one more table. I extend, this is only a simple example. To make it very clear, I am beginning with a very simplest example. I will later on come to gravity and then come to Brahman. This is what Swamiji wants us to understand. That's why, when Swamiji says both secular and spiritual knowledge is within, we are trying to understand first the secular knowledge. Now come to gravity. I have given the example of a table. Now come to the law of gravitation. When we say Newton discovered gravity, we read the laws of motion. We heard it, law of gravitation in the high school, but we learned the law of gravitation and the law of forces, three laws of Newton's, first law, second law, third law, inertia, all those things when we studied first PCR, class 11. Is it not? Teacher tried to make us understand the laws of motions, Newton's laws of motions. So, when we by-hearted those laws, E equals mc square or m equals Fa, mass is equal to force into acceleration. That is m represents the moment. Force in a particular direction, the acceleration along with the mass we call m. Ma, force is equal to ma, mass into acceleration. So, to calculate momentum we use that formula. When we studied m is equal to Fa, it is not knowledge within, it was a information. I take that information, law of forces, and rearrange all the links connected with law of forces within. Then the knowledge comes from within. Then you discover m is equal to Fa, not Newton. Newton was a suggestion. Teacher gave a suggestion to understand gravity. Taking those suggestions, I rearranged all the links and the knowledge dawned within. The knowledge is within, both secular and spiritual. Gravity was a law, gravitational force. To understand that, Newton discovered it. And to discover, I have to discover that. There is a veil covering all that. Discover. Covering means removing the cover is called discover. There is a covering for all the knowledge. You discover. So misery makes you understand this life better than happiness. It is discover. So the teacher was the friction and the knowledge was the gravity. The word was a suggestion. Swamiji continuing, like fire in a piece of flint, knowledge exists in the mind. Suggestion is the friction which brings it out. I repeat, like fire in a piece of flint, knowledge exists in the mind. Suggestion is the friction which brings it out. Flint means what? Kallu. That friction. A particular stone, through friction, a spark comes out. Adding cotton to it, you bring out fire. If you have seen some traditional Mimamsaka Yaga, Yagna, they will not bring fire either from the kitchen or from the charcoal. Here what they do? They ask you to bring from charcoal from the kitchen and some Grihastha, the Dharma Patni, should light the fire. That is the tradition. So they bring the fire from the kitchen and they light with a camphor they light, and then through that they start a homa. Now, the tradition is that you should have a pot, a churning tool, and 2 stones. You have to churn it in a particular method with a particular friction, with a particular force, through which you create a friction, you add cotton to it, and then go on adding a little bit of coconut waste, etc. Then you bring out the fire by churning. You should never bring the kitchen. That's the traditional way. So that is called a flint, a piece of flint. Like fire in a piece of flint, knowledge exists in the mind. Suggestion is the friction which brings it out. Now, I bring that example of Narendranath. Why a merciful God has given so much misery in this world? I stop it here. We'll continue discussion in the next class. It's time. So, when Swamiji says, these are all his life experiences, whatever he shares, these are all his experiences, Swamiji's experiences. He is giving all his life experiences through lectures. Taking these lectures, you have to analyze the life of Thakurma and Swamiji. You have read, many of our devotees have read the life of Thakurma and Swamiji. Take these examples. Knowledge is within, it's like a flint, a piece of, through fiction, knowledge comes out. And so many further things. You try to analyze all these messages, taking the life of Holy Mother, Swami Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna. When Swamiji says the goal of mankind is knowledge, apply it to Sri Ramakrishna. You will get all the examples. Yes, in Sri Ramakrishna's life, we find every action leading to knowledge. In our, every action has a contradiction towards the goal. Many people say, we are doing mantra japa from 40 years, nothing is happening, Swamiji. Are you truthful? Put that question there. Dhani, he asked. Gadadhara gave that reply to his Ramkumara long back in 1840, he gave that answer. Have you read it? Then you should not ask this question. Mohamji, I am doing the mantra japa 40 years, nothing happened. Like Gadai, he told, I am not truthful. Not being truthful, Gayatri, I cannot realize Gayatri. He understood it. Over. Answered. So, when mankind knowledge, see that your karma, does it lead to character which leads to knowledge? No. Rectify wherever it has to be rectified. Theory is there. Apply it to the lives of Thakurma Swamiji. You will get the answers for all the questions. That's the way to analyze. That's why we will analyze Swamiji's example to know a little bit of knowledge is within in the next class on next Sunday. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.